Alright, running. Refresh should show up. There we are. Excuse me. Go in. Shut up, Nexogear. Edit video. Get to the control room. Live. Authorization on, please. Thank you, YouTube. I would like to burn my cut. And where is it? Control room. There we go. But how is chat rate 2 if there's nothing? Oh yeah, I have to set to live chat. Or there's still nothing in live chat, actually. So how is chat rate 2? That makes no sense. All right. 0 versus 3 viewers. OBS says everything works fine. All right, there we go. One person. Oh, that's weird for Josh not to be the first person who shows up. All right, initiating 5 to 10 minute wait for any potential arrivals. Check on random stuff in the meantime. Manually set my weather thing in the bottom back to what it is, back up home in Fairbanks, so I can at least look down there and imagine that I am not stuck in this miserable underworld known as the lower 48 U.S. states. 80, starting to creep into the 80s just as I expected. Silver's still not wanting to do what it should be doing. Copper is, though. Copper's making its way up. And actually, I think zinc was one of the ones that was finally reacting to reality. Yeah, zinc's on its way up, as it should be. It should be much higher than this, though. It should be up around like $5,000 per ton, but it's on its way up, as zinc inventories are now down to only about 20,000 tons in storage versus the 1 million tons in storage that they were at back in the early 2010s. And the only other time in modern economic history, aka everything post World War II, that they were at such a low level was back in the late 80s, I believe, which you can see on a corresponding price spike there, which inflation adjusted comes out to around close to 5K. So they really should it really should be way higher than it is right now, as 20,000 tons in storage compared to today's consumption levels versus what 20,000 tons in storage was compared to global consumption levels back in the 80s, kind of not the same thing. So zinc prices, along with prices of literally everything, should be way higher, but they are lagging behind reality. Anybody else here? Nope. Well, either 1 or 3. YouTube can't make up its mind. Oh, we got one more. Where's Josh, though? Josh, are you there? I mean, I know there's not really going to be anything I'm going to have to do mod-wise, but am I going to have to mod my own chat? Like, I've only actually had to ban someone once in, I think we're up to like 15 live streams that we've done. But I only had to ban one person, at least in live stream chat, because they were spamming political slogans. In the comments, though, in comments on videos, I've had to ban like 400 people Granted, 90% of them were bots, just spamming links, but around like 40 of them were actual people. Actually, oh no, gotta have to go here. So give it another 5 minutes or so. Wait for other people to potentially show up. Molybdenum had a major price spike. I'll be covering that in a short video soon, in a day or two. Nickel's acting like it's going to start acquiescing to reality, but I still don't trust it, or rather, I don't trust the market in big air quotes. Platinum group metals, especially, really should be way higher than this. Everything else is pretty balanced, though. Data. Uh, OBS says everything's fine. So I'm going to assert that the problem is on YouTube's end if there is a problem. Oh, yeah, I forgot. It says my bit rate is 0, even though no, it's not. My bit rate is 2.8 megabits. So no, that's way above 0 actually, but thanks YouTube for reporting stuff accurately. I can be heard, right? YouTube is lying, and you guys do actually hear me speaking, right? Like my default assumption is that YouTube is lying, but I'm not always positive. Wait for a response there. Oh, okay. That's normal though. I think even on like a if someone has like the fastest possible connection, the delay between me saying something and you hearing it is still going to be something like 5 seconds, I think. Because the signals are photons going through fiber optics, so that travels at the speed of light. But the computer processing it at each terminal or internet connecting node or whatever they're called, those that's actual like that's actual little like nano or technically pico electricity running across the processors. So that doesn't travel at the speed of light. That takes a tiny fraction of a fraction of a second at each little interval. So even if you had like maximum internet connection, you would still have a bit of a delay. And I don't have maximum internet connection. I have like uh I have I would call the internet I have here very high quality normal people internet connection. What was I going to look at? I lost my thought. Oh, yeah, probably actually should check this real quick. More stuff off Norway. Actually, you can see from the map right there, they're continuing to move up northwards as they actually have water and territory to expand into, unlike the UK. Ooh, finally some more stuff going on in Thailand. I was waiting for that. They actually should have a fair deal more than has actually been produced from them. But a lot of the exploration going on there was back in like the 90s, and that was when one of the mega oil price slumps happened. It went down to like $9 a barrel. So basically, most exploration and development stopped almost everywhere. But the fields that were discovered and developed during the 90s up until things stopped ended up coming mostly online by the mid 2000s, which is where you see you see when I show the graphs, that's where Thailand's production plateau jumped up into existence from, and then stayed around until like 2020 or so. So things finally, or some exploration and development finally returning to Thailand. Anything else? Anybody got anything else? More stuff offshore Malaysia to be expected. Yeah, Somalia most likely has quite a fair bit. Uh, just it's there's going to be a lot more onshore based on the geology and topography. They're just obsessing over offshore right now because it's very happily gotten a lot better in terms of stability over the last few years. But no one in the industry is that eager to start doing stuff onshore Somalia, because that's like that they would consider that being in Somalia, whereas being offshore of Somalia is just it's they just consider that being in the ocean. But yeah, we've been training Somalis on predators and reapers, and Turkey's been training them on Bayraktars, and they're picking it up really well. And we're starting. Us and Turkey are both handing them off drones now, and they've been really hammering Al Shabaab pretty bad. Like after after so long of basically operating with impunity, during the last like 2 years in particular, the militants out in the western like desert portions have just been getting hammered one week after another with drone strikes. One second, I'm gonna send Josh a text to actually see if he's alive. All right, I poked him. Theoretically, if he's alive, he should show up. All right, so we'll probably start now. Either 6 or 7 or 8. I don't know. Yeah, usually specific streams usually end up getting more viewers. Though I was surprised that even 3 people showed up for my photography show off stream. All right, let's go to where's downloads, topo. I should have everything in here theoretically. Africa, Arctic, South America stuff, U.S., Middle East, India, Guyana, China, Russia. Do I? Ooh, I don't think I have a full Asia one. Also, where's okay? I do have Europe. Yeah, all the streams get uploaded in their full length as videos eventually. They're not under the regular videos because YouTube changed the layout for some stupid reason. So instead of under videos, you won't find them here. Over here in live, that's where they put the recordings of all the streams, even though they're recordings, they're not live. but YouTube wanted to be stupid, so that's what they're doing. But yeah, with the exception of like, I usually cut out, or I often cut out the first 5 or 10 minutes, unless people show up really fast, like they did this time. All right, I think, do I want to get one of the entirety of Asia, or do I already have what I need? Well, I got Malaysia and Indonesia there, plus Papua New Guinea and Australia. Actually, I don't. I probably want a more focused one. All right, hold on. Get some of these real quick. Australia topographic map. Grab one of these. So, at least see if we can get one of the better ones. Is this one good? I'll try that one. And also, look at this one. Well, this one's covered in copyright spam. I don't like the inverted color ones. The inverted colors. Don't do that to me. What about this one? This one looks decent. It's a bit bright. Come on, guys. Why do you gotta do this to me? Alright. We'll just have to settle for this one. Get this. Australia topo. Go in the topographic folder. There we go. And oh yeah, Antarctica. Oh man. Oh wait. No, I want the ice. I want the ice there because I want the seafloor stuff primarily. Actually, Google Earth probably should have that on its own. So actually, we can probably just leave that. Anyways, speaking of that, here we go. Josh, are you there? Apparently not. I guess he's dead. And so is my stream. Everybody left. Canada. Oh, yeah. All right. Well, their Arctic stuff is in the Arctic portion, but yeah, I should probably get one specifically. Unless, do I have the whole of North America, or was it just the U.S.? U.S. Oh, wow. I actually don't have the whole of North America. America topographic. Let's go. Why are you cutting off like the upper half of Canada? And why are you so bright? Who is making these? These are horrible. The map definition is like, uh, I mean, okay, I'll give it a look. Why are you ruining this for me? Don't do this. Why are you ruining this? Stop doing things like this. Yeah, you're all cutting it off, and what are you showing all this weird stuff here for? Okay, no, that's that one. This one, try, what was the other one? No, no. Man, these are all bad. Like, what is with these colors? You are trying to blind somebody. Who is making these? Oh, wait, iStock. I can't use that. Gonna get myself in trouble. Maybe this one, I didn't tell you to click on it. I said to bring it up. Those are two completely different things. All right. Well, we're gonna have to settle for some of this stuff. NA, topo, and this version, which is kind of warped. That's not really what it's like right there. That's a bit off. But all right, I'll just include you anyways. NA, topo 2. And Josh is here now. Nope, never mind. All right, rip Josh, I guess. Google Earth. All right, so future oil supplies. This is not just specifically speaking of countries that are not yet already supplying oil. This is just the broad category of future oil supplies in general. Please zoom, Google Earth, thank you. And this isn't in any nice alphabetical order or anything like that, because it was in the order that things came to me as I was just writing the list down. So the first one, obviously, one I speak a lot about now, is Guyana. And you'll see in a second that this version, what you see on Google Earth for the offshore, like seafloor topography, is not really accurate, except in regions where the exact seafloor topography has actually been uploaded or installed. And in the coasts around most first world and even like second world nations like Brazil, what you see is relatively accurate because a lot of seafloor surveying has been done there specifically. But in a lot of other places, it's just a really generalized amalgamation based on satellites, some basic satellite signaling, which you've likely seen if you've been following the whole MH370 search for the last decade. You will have seen like the results of that, like a before after comparison. Well, they'll show like what our idea of the seafloor in the general area of that part of the Indian Ocean was, which was a very low resolution basic idea versus what we actually know that particular area looks like now because we've done so much sonar mapping of it trying to find the plane. So particularly like off the coast here, this is still just a really basic thing based on wave distortions that satellites pick up. However, we do actually have the very specific offshore Guyana stuff. It just hasn't been put into Google Earth yet. But anyways, Guyana here, small nation in northern South America, is already supplying oil now and is going to be a much bigger supplier of future oil than we initially expected. We expected they would probably have a decent bit. However, uh, both mine and the industry's expectations were initially we'll probably find enough over time to get them up to like a peak of between maybe 1 and 1.5 million barrels a day sometime in like the early 2030s. However, Guyana has proven way more prolific than that. Basically, every couple of months, they keep finding another billion barrel field or sometimes a 2 billion barrel field. And it is up to the point now that uh, by with everything, with not everything that's been discovered, just everything for which plans have already been laid and work has already started on, everything that is already in progress which doesn't include the three most recent field discoveries, everything that is already in progress in terms of work being done will bring them up to at least 1 point, I think, 4 million barrels per day by the early 2030s. And if you account for the most recent discoveries, the ones that happened in 2022, then accounting for those and accounting for depletion by that point in time, that is likely going to have them up at like 1.6 or 1.7 by the mid 2030s. And again, that would be if we discover nothing else offshore of Guyana or onshore Guyana from here on out, which is not going to be the case because, like I said, they keep finding things every like other month because Guyana has proven to be one of the most prolific sites out there. Oh man, that one is. Do I have to zoom in? Oh wait. Okay, it is way higher, so I can zoom in and not like distort the image. So, uh, Guyana has, you can see much more definition here. Offshore of Guyana has a nice sort of a C-shaped, like C-shaped bowl, half bowl formation here, which is really nice. It's a smaller version of what the U.S. and Mexican Gulf of Mexico formation is like, which I'm assuming, well aware of how much oil has been discovered there. Now, because of the smaller size, there will in total be less, but there's still obviously going to be quite a lot because they've already found quite a lot. And most of it is within Guyana or Guyana's water territory. Some of it is within Suriname, and offshore exploration has started for Suriname. And so Suriname is on this list too because they are almost certainly going to find stuff there because it's part of the same thing. And Trinidad and Tobago hasn't actually come out this far. I think, I'm not positive, I think it's because there was like dispute over this particular area, whether it would be decided to belong to Venezuela or Trinidad. I'm not positive, but I think that was the issue. And at some point, like recently, it was settled and decided in the international court or whatever that it belongs to Trinidad and Tobago. So actually, Trinidad and Tobago could start expanding out over here now that they have access to this and salvage their oil production for at least a little bit, as their export ratio is almost non-existent now. As I say in the production update videos, they're barely holding themselves in the 50,000s, while their domestic consumption is usually in the 40,000s. However, they have access to this now, which is part of this whole formation, so they theoretically probably have a fair bit more they could get into. But most of it primarily falls to Guyana, and I honestly expect, based on the pattern so far, that they're going to obviously keep with the additional discoveries just based on the evidence of how prolific the formation is so far. And I definitively believe now their like total peak is going to absolutely end up being over 2 million barrels per day sometime in the probably later 2030s and possibly even up into the early 2040s. And I honestly would not be shocked now if it's actually like higher, like closer to 3. I don't think it will push like beyond that though, but I definitely now think they're actually going to end up reaching into somewhere between 2 and 3. And then Suriname next to them sharing that won't obviously have as much, but based on how prolific Guyana's portion of the formation has been, there is a decent chance for Suriname to have enough that they might be able to probably push like a million up in sometime in the 2030s. But it's Guyana that's going to have comparatively the mega numbers 2 to 3 times the size. Although there is also the issue that there's most likely a war coming. Me speaking from the US, are going to end up at war with Venezuela because, similar to the Iraq Kuwait situation back in 1990, 1991, Venezuela claims that the western half of Guyana is actually Venezuelan territory, and they only really started like pushing that claim as soon as Guyana started discovering a bunch of oil. So now Venezuela's probably going to try to do something to because that's what floundering totalitarian regimes do, as current events have recently been showing is when stuff's not going that well, just start a war, start an invasion, try a distraction. It works well. However, it's not really going to end well because Venezuela essentially doesn't have a real military. They have they have jeeps and some helicopters with dudes in ski masks who black bag people speaking out against the government and make them disappear. And that doesn't really work well as a military force. So it's not really going to go that well if and when it happens. And the most likely time frame I would say for it happening would probably be the later part of this decade, the later 2020s. And so that would end up being really fast because it's just on our part, it's just going to be a bunch of airstrikes. And then that will end up resulting in regime change in Venezuela, which will then result in the influx of external oil industries, which will bring about the going all in that I spoke of on the Orinoco Belt formation, which will then pump Venezuela up to something like 5 or 6 million barrels a day, which from Venezuela's reserves could be maintained for basically this entire century. And so that's where Venezuela comes onto the list, obviously. Though technically on the list, as I wrote it out, they were like way down there, like an hour from now. But it worked better to just speak of everything regionally. Although, for all I know, um, Maduro or whoever it is in Caracas now could just flip the table and decide to just open everything up to external oil industries and not do the whole Guyana angle because he did decide to let Chevron back in now, although he has decided that twice in the past 2 years or the past 3 years, and then immediately like redacted the decision after 2 months. So kind of like Xi Jinping stopping COVID restrictions, which is why I'm not really trusting him on this COVID zero reversal thing because he did that 3 times already and then ended up reversing it. So I don't know. Maybe he's letting Chevron in permanently this time, for all I know. But the last time he let Chevron in, they were able to recover Venezuela's production up to like 900,000 barrels per day. But then he expelled them. So we'll have to see. Nebraska person, thank you for $10. And looks like Josh is still dead. Peak oil, capably no. Capably no, because the collapse in production that we experienced was COVID induced. That was artificial because of demand collapse. You'll see in the pattern, we go to it, and the production withholdings right now are artificial. They're COVID-induced production cuts and Russian production reduction because of absent demand from their former European customers. So Russia has had to restrain their production down to 9.3 million barrels per day now, in order to obviously, not swell their storage and burst the pipes. So the current it currently not being around 103 or 104 at the moment, which is where it probably would be, is artificial. That's because of the OPEC cuts and because of Russia's production reductions. And it also wouldn't stay up at 104 if it was there for very long, because demand is not there, at least at the moment. Though technically this is November data, because Russia's oil demand is now like 500 or 600,000 barrels per day below where it otherwise would be because of economic contraction. Also, Ukraine's oil demand is gone for the most part. They would normally be at 300,000 on average, and they're probably down between like 50 and 70, a lot of which is obviously being used by military vehicles fighting in the war. And India is still down, although they did bump up with the newest data. They're still not back up to their 5.5 yet, but they are up around 5.1. So demand is still down by quite a bit, which means that Supply, anyways, would not be up there because that would cause a huge price contraction, which nobody wants. Well, people who pay for fuel for their vehicles want, but none of the companies or the industry or the countries who produce oil wants, obviously. And from a supply situation, actually, a price contraction is kind of bad because that puts a halt to exploration and development, as we have seen with the various patterns throughout history. So, but in terms of have we reached peak oil, uh, like you have to look at capability, and in that case, no. We will. Uh, the most likely time frame is still coming up, and that is the second half of this decade. Initially, when I first started doing this back in like the mid 2010s, I expected more the middle of this decade, more like 2023 or 2024. However, uh, I actually changed my expectations with new data and new like discoveries and stuff. And so now it looks more like a few years on from that, especially because of depletion delays we've had due to production shutdowns because of things like COVID. So it's been pushed off a bit into the later 2020s, most likely. I love how this is still saying my bitrate is 0. Oh, now it says excellent collection. Thank you, YouTube. You are so consistent. What do you say? OBS, you say I'm fine. A lot of people throw this at me. They say, "Oh, well, oil peaked in 2018 because that was the highest number, and it hasn't been at that number since." However, those people also don't have eyes that they don't look at things. Like before that, I guarantee you they were saying that it peaked in 2016 because it went to 99.5 and it didn't touch 99.5 again until uh, 2018, and then before that, it peaked in 2008, which I do refer to that as the first oil production peak because the actual pattern you'll see things like this in that just like you'll see with countries that there will be a peak of sorts that then ends up like there's a bit of a decline or a flatlining before more exploration and development begins taking place, and then production increases again or at least stays level. And so basically, what happened and what could have, at least to people with brains to think, could have been seen to happen is that as things flattened out starting around like 2005 and ended up culminating here in 2008, that caused the massive oil price spikes that you're familiar with, which were part of the leading cause of the global financial collapse in 2008. However, that period of triple digit oil prices, which lasted up until like 2013 or 2014, that spurred huge exploration and development operations and field expansion projects and the massive expansion of shale drilling, shale fracking operations, which then, as one could easily expect, ended up resulting in this price surge here. And this flatline in the later 2010s was because of OPEC production cuts that they maintained for several years because around 2014 oil prices collapsed and OPEC wanted them back up. And so they maintained relatively mild oil production cuts up until about 2019. And then after that, we had COVID, the mega crash because the global demand collapsed. So we kind of had to contract supply because you can't just keep, pumping out oil if it's not being used. Eventually, your tanks are going to fill up and your pipelines are going to burst open. It's a whole not something you want to do. So we had that artificial collapse and recovery as global demand recovered. And now we are hanging out around 101.5 or so, which is a flattening out because of, like I said, the newly introduced OPEC oil production cuts and Russia's production gradually dropping down as customer absence grows, and as the upcoming 90s-esque production downturn inevitably comes that they're going to be experiencing, the earliest point of which would probably begin this spring, but it all depends on precisely how much spare stuff and tech they had on hand left over before all the external oil companies that were responsible for their recovery and Arctic developments left. So I don't know that precisely. And similar to their mining output, which I will go over in my yearly mining data video with the USGS thing, the major document that gets released every year by the USGS that has all the global mining data for each year. The one for this year with data from 2022, which will be called the MCS 2023. Uh, a guy from the USGS did get back to me, and he said that they're actually releasing it a few weeks early this year. Praise God, on January 30th or 31st. So we will be getting this data 2 or 3 weeks earlier than we normally would. But yeah, this well, once you get past the introduction stuff, yeah, this thing with all the yearly data and stuff of whatnot, uh, Russia's mining output, I expected to start having a downturn around late fall of 2022, and I ended up being correct about that. As it varies across each metal because different types of mines and different mines in particular are using different kinds of equipment, different makers. Some of them before the sanctions came down may have just restocked on a bunch of spare parts and vehicles. Some of them might not have for a while. So it was going to be variable, and it is varying across different metals and minerals. But in general, across the different ones, the decline has so far been around 2 to 7% in output. And over the course of this year, I'd expect their mining output to climb upwards in terms of its decline into just getting into the double digits. And then if sanctions and supply withholding are still in place, multiple years going forward, then once we get into next year, 2024 and onwards, then it's going to become a very steep decline because it's a compounding exponential effect as you keep like decking one mining vehicle after another to cannibalize them for parts and stuff. So it becomes a stacking effect. Oh, there's Josh. Josh is not dead. Josh is actually alive. Uh, Peter Zion. Uh, he's he's a dude. He doesn't really. He's a bit over the top with stuff, and kind of constantly looks at things from like literally one angle, and doesn't really consider any other possibilities. And like according to him, we were literally supposed to be like starving by now, which I disagreed with when he said it, and I'm vocally in several videos. I think I even said the only starvation episodes are going to end up coming in heavily Ukraine/Russian grain dependent areas like the Horn of Africa and Afghanistan, because a lot of Russian and Ukrainian grain is the grain that usually gets used for relief agencies for food aid deliveries, which Afghanistan was heavily reliant on. And those two areas are, to no surprise, the only areas that really experienced famine, or sorry, not past tense, are still experiencing famine right now. Like I think the general estimates, because most of the countries there don't exactly have a like really well tracking database of all their citizens, but from general, at least a general glaze over of hospital data, most of the estimates are that between the Horn of Africa region nations and including Kenya and South Sudan as well, plus Afghanistan, those combined between them, somewhere between 1 and 2 million people have starved to death between September and right now, or the start of this year. Exact number obviously is kind of uncertain because a huge amount of the area in those nations is undeveloped areas that aren't exactly tracked by anything. But the people come to the developed areas of those countries to go to the hospitals, and so the hospitals do have like some record of how many people have dropped from starvation. But Zion was claiming that stuff was going to happen like massive gargantuan famines like worldwide, which is not a thing. He also, I think, said that uh, the neon supply was going to disappear, and the world's capacity to make computer processors because neon's required for those lithography lasers was going to disappear completely, which was not true. It's not the the Ukrainian steel mills were not the only place that we can get neon from. We can literally get it from any steel mill we want. It's just that Ukraine and Russia offered it really cheap, just like how Europe can get gas from like almost anywhere else. It's just Russia offered it really cheap all this time. That's why Europe kept going to them. You're seeing all these countries now, like Algeria and Azerbaijan and Egypt and even Norway, that had all this extra like capacity they could have been pumping all this time, but they Europe didn't want it because Russia was offering it cheaper. That's literally the reason. It's the same with the neon supply. China and India are basically picking up the neon tab for global supply right now. It has not returned to pre-invasion levels, mind you, but it didn't disappear. So Zion's kind of a bit of a jumpy alarmist, and also he lost any credibility he had once he went on something like the Joe Rogan podcast, anyways. Because once you sit down in a room with like uh, a a big bald dude like doing DMT and smoking blunts or whatever, you immediately like you've abandoned your credibility at that point in any fashion. Ooh, thank you. Another $10. Dang. Careful, or I'm actually gonna like be able to afford to go home or something. Okay, so actually on the list that I was supposed to be going over, but kept like going off from stabilize. Oh, I guess that is stabilized. Another upcoming oil area is this area right here. What the? I didn't click on you. Go away. The major one that's actually on the road to stuff already is Senegal. And actually, we pull up a topographic map. Wait, I should already have one. Africa topographic map. Excuse me. Move, move. Thank you. Or don't listen. Obey me. Computer, obey me. Thank you. There we go. Do what you are supposed to. So yeah, I have different versions of the topographic map, but you see the area right here. You see the definitive point that Senegal makes, and then you have Guinea and Guinea-Bissau right here, and Mauritania up here. So you have this nice half bowl, very low-lying depression in inlay, I think is the word I wanted to use here, plus their their gentle sloping offshore arrangement as well, particularly in Guinea's case. But most of the stuff so far has been going on in Senegal or offshore Senegal, although there's probably a decent bit more onshore of Senegal. But the industry hasn't been too eager to go onshore in Senegal for some reason, which is a bit like it's not really warranted. Like Senegal is perfectly fine. Senegal is like completely stable. It's Mauritania that has issues. Oh no, my mouse is starting to disobey me. I might have to get an actual mouse. Uh, I think there's some stuff starting to start up off of Guinea, but most stuff has been offshore of Senegal so far. And they have discovered a few fields that I believe are coming online either this year or next year, and will be bringing Senegal up to a start off of between 200 and 300,000 barrels per day. And with elevated prices, exploration should be continuing. And there, in terms of the geology, moving from the topography over to the actual geology, the rock layers and the porosity and stuff like that. The geology for them for this region is very similar to the geology of the Guyana, Suriname, Trinidad, and Tobago region. So that's very indicatively good for potential additional discoveries. They don't have, the nice offshore bowl, but they do have the onshore bowl, which is excellent as well. Which is what? Oh, wait, I already have it open. Which is what? If we get to it, U.S. 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 Which is what the U.S. Kind of had actually, or has. We have a nice sort of onshore bowl formation, and this extreme low-lying area here is where most of the early oil fields were discovered initially back in the early 1900s and stuff. Things like, say, Spindletop. The really big one was right on the Louisiana-Texas border. And yeah, most of the early conventional stuff was around here. And we had just started moving in here, which is about the limit, because as you can see, this is a more elevated, but it's still a consistent elevation, so it's quote unquote flat. It's just sloping flat. Then it jumps once you hit the inside of New Mexico. Then it jumps into jagged mountains, which is where you stop finding oil. But then we started pushing here, and we discovered the Permian Basin and stuff. And you can actually see the wall here that forms the boundary of where the Eagle Ford Formation takes place. But yeah, we had a bowl, which usually is a good indication that you can have quite a bit. And the Senegal, Mauritania, Guinea area has a bowl, a similar bowl, but also things will depend pretty heavily on the geology as well. So Senegal, I'm not positive over, but they should definitely keep finding enough to go up like towards a high point at some point in the future of 1 million barrels a day. I'd be surprised if they didn't. Guinea, probably similar-ish, or at least the high hundreds of thousands, particularly because they have more of the offshore gentle sloping shelf region. Mauritania does likely have a fair bit because they have a huge chunk of the bowl formation and also other parts of it or other formations like this big circular dip here. I should probably zoom in a little bit. Like this circular dip here, these depression areas as well, similar to, say, stuff like over here in Chad, where they found some oil at least, although instability in Chad led to cessation of the exploration and development. But also similar to, say, uh, these these divots and stuff where Algeria found some of their more southern reserves, and also Algeria had this big inlay here, which is where most of their stuff was. So Mauritania probably does have a fair bit in there, but development for them is really, really iffy. It's really questionable because they just can't stay stable. Like they are able to keep one area, I think, up around here stable, because that's where their iron mines are. But that's about it. The rest of it is kind of a bit wildlandish, a bit Borderlands-ish, and also kind of Islamic militant-ish, as this part of the Sahel region, I believe, is the proper term, is where the African version of ISIS tends to run around, since it's not really like patrolled or policed all that well. So, granted, they're not really doing much out there. Thankfully, they're just kind of like just running around in the desert, being in a desert, which is better than them like actually bombing anything. But to actually for Mauritania or Mali for that matter, Mali being around here or so, having these bits for Mauritania or Mali to actually be able to do anything, the whole Sahel ISIS branch or issue would have to be like hammered out of existence, like Somalia, the U.S. and Turkey are doing in Somalia right now. And Somalia, you can see here, uh, how low will the resolution go if I zoom in? It starts to get a bit iffy. I won't zoom in that much. But Somalia here, you can see, has a on land gentle sloping formation and a bit of an inlaid curve there, which is nice, and has river downflows in several regions coming down like that, which is really good. That's what Nigeria has, leading into its very low lying area and offshore shelf fan formation. When you have said area, such an area with whether still existing or formerly existing rivers that lead into it or once led into it, that makes it especially good. So that's a decent indicator. I don't know if that river even still exists in Somalia because they've been in a drought for like 7 decades now. But that's a good indicator resource-wise. And the south will probably be the area that gets like stabilized the most, or at least first, because that's the area they want to do initial offshore stuff of, because that's the only area that really has any bit of offshore shelf. And also, apart from where there's probably going to be a decent bit of petroleum, the south of Somalia is also where, in one particular layer, like I think 15 or 20 meters down, the bedded sand near the coast is actually very high in rare earth metal concentration. So that will be coming into play eventually, assuming humanity keeps aimlessly chasing the whole uh, wind turbines and electric vehicles thing, which is not going to pan out, as I explained in the whole green energy no working math video, which I actually have to remake because it's been like 3 years. And I also should probably look at chat because it's been like half an hour. All right, goodbye, Nebraska person. Then, do we have a future? Well, that depends heavily on the context of that question. If you're asking, is civilization going to collapse and we're going to fade back into tribal existence tomorrow, then the answer is no, that's not going to happen. Some form of like a coherent civilization like this is going to keep going, as even every time like civilizations collapsed in throughout history, they didn't like literally collapse and everything just ceased to exist. It's the order of the regional order, so to speak, because there wasn't really a global setup yet up until like the 17 and 1800s. The regional order kind of would just fall apart and be rearranged. Usually there would be like massive warfare between the major powers of a particular region, and stuff along those lines. Uh, in terms of, as I've said before, in terms of like when is stuff going to get the worst and everything's like really gonna come crashing down and fall apart to huge levels, the worst portion is going to be around the middle of this century or so. The 2020s, as we go through them, are still are still going to look relatively like normalish, and even the 2030s. But by the time you get to the 2030s, it's going to really start tipping the scales towards things still look normal as long as you are in one of insert 20 out of 180 countries here and you have money. And then once you roll into the 2040s, that's when it starts to dive like hard. That's when quite a few things are going to be depleted out. And I actually will do a video specifically on that because I once wrote a story, or at least the first portion of it, that takes place in 2043 and follows a few specific people in the area that I grew up in the southeastern U.S. before I moved to Alaska. So I might do like not necessarily a reading quote unquote of it, but like a run through of like the first few chapters of what is seen and what's become common, at least in my like outlook of this version of 2043. So I might do that as like a video at some point, but once you hit the 2040s, then things start to dive hard, and beyond that, it's going to be too chaotic for me to like say anything for certain. It, ugh, what was on my mind? Something else was on my mind, but it just disappeared because I'm 29 and a half now, so I'm ancient, and my brain is starting to fail me already. I can feel my bones turning to dust even as I sit here. Uh, yeah, the Amazon issue is going to be a thing. It might, that is actually something, I'll give you a spoiler, I guess you can call it, of my what the real 2030s are going to look like video, or I might turn it into a stream. I'm not sure because I'll give you guys an admission that I gave you already. I'm starting to like doing streams more than videos just because it gives me like a lazy excuse to not edit. Because normally I mess up a bunch of stuff and I'm kind of rambly when I'm recording videos, and it takes me multiple hours to edit the audio down to the 10 minutes that you end up seeing. However, when I do a stream, I can just ignore the whole thing, leave the entire like 2 or 3 hours up with the excuse of, well, it's a stream. You're expected to be rambly when you're live. I get to use that as an excuse to not do work. Yeah, the Amazon issue is growing. You can see this patchy area here where it used to be. Uh, don't make the mistake that the Amazon was like the entirety of Brazil. A lot of people seem to think that. That's not the case. It came up to right about here or so. This gray area here, you can particularly see, shows you a decent bit of it, and then the patchy work up here. So it has been cut back by quite a bit, which is not good for us. Because I believe at its full extent, the Amazon specifically, not just the Brazilian portion, but the entire Amazon, was responsible for more than 10% of our oxygen supply, like 11 or 12. With how much reduction there's been, its share of production of our oxygen supply is now down to like around exactly 10%, and the total oxygen supply we're getting itself is lower. So as a more famous YouTuber than me said a few months ago, the Amazon is, partly 10% responsible for us being alive, so it would be nice if it stuck around, kinda. Uh, so the Amazon problem might not persist, though. Lula has recently won the Brazilian elections, for anybody who's not aware, and he's not really a deforestation fan, and he actually did a good job halting it while he was in office previously. So he theoretically should be able to bring that to a stop. And if not, you're going to get into the spoiler that I mentioned for my What the Real 2030s May Look Like video. In that, by the 2030s, probably by the later 2030s, maybe delayed until the 2040s, once the weight and impact of things is starting to come down on people, you might start seeing, instead of just humanitarian and resource-based interventions, military interventions, you might end up actually start seeing uh, a coalition of the willing doing things like environmental military interventions, like invading countries that are continuing to deforest tropical rainforests in order to stop them by force. So that will be interesting to see. I'm not saying that's like definitively going to happen, but that's actually at least I consider a really, really strong possibility of something that might happen. And since we're on Brazil, actually, Brazil is another one on the list of future oil supply, as Brazil has quite a bit. And Brazil is not even done with its exploration and development. Most of what Brazil has explored has been around this area I'm circling, and a bit out here, as this sloping down shelf up to this point should have some as well, although most will be closer to shore on the shallower area. This semi-bowl formation here should have a decent bit along with this out shelf. However, they have barely touched this area. Like I said, it's mostly been here. And when they bring the new fields online this year, they're going to go up to between 3.6 and 3.8 million barrels per day. Again, most of that 3.5 million barrels per day that they're about to reach is just coming from this region. So they also have this offshore region and some decent semi-bowl slopes they can go into. And they have just started doing more stuff in the north with this big shelf area and this brief offshore fan. And they've done more there than they have offshore of this area and the southern area, but they still haven't done all that much. So there is actually a decent chance Brazil could end up like cranking up another couple million barrels a day, up to like having a peak somewhere between 5 and 7, maybe, if they keep going with stuff. And Lula is very anti deforestation. However, he is actually not anti oil exploration, which is a rare combination to have. It's actually like the perfect combination to have. Uh, like plenty of offshore oil exploration like kept going while he was president. He was like perfectly fine with it. Politically, like in political speeches, he like said stuff against it and other like and other things, but he let it keep going. So Brazil is going to keep providing for a while, oil wise, and is actually likely to have quite a bit more than they've been pumping out already. Check chat. Whoa! What is with you guys? You were like over talking today. That's destroyed. Go just have that blah 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 blah. Australia. Have Australia. Have I added Australia yet to my? Well, I didn't tell you to go out that far to my my viewer talk map. I think I did. Yeah, I did. Okay, because all my various maps I fill in, I have I have this one on top of them that has highlighted areas from which I have had different different viewers, but viewers who like speak. Like, you know, I could go into the YouTube statistics or whatever on my channel and just look at where are people watching from, but that doesn't count because like that could be one-time watchers for all I know. So I only count like people who are definitively alive and speaking, and also if I just looked at like the statistics, like someone like just dismissed me and told me to do like a year back or so, like literally like half, I know half of you are using VPNs anyways. So like, you know, you could be talking to me from South Africa, but your computer's gonna tell YouTube that you're in like Kazakhstan or something. So, all right, I do have Australia. I'm gonna have to add Somalia now, since I have Omar. I think that's everybody though. Okay, now continuing to read this. Dang. Blah. Uh, Methane release. Yeah, that is already ongoing. I've spoken about that before. That we, in terms of when people have commented about like stopping climate change, we're already past a like irreversible tipping point in it, in terms that it's going to continue no matter what we do. However, it is portrayed completely false in that it's constantly talked about that like uh, we're going to warm up to 6 degrees and the Earth is going to boil and turn into Venus. When like no, it's not. That's not how reality works. That's not how anything works. It's not. If we warm up too fast, the thermohaline circulation will get shut down by the temperature shifts and the inflooding of fresh water. The Earth will cold snap itself for a century or two, usually. Like the Younger Dryas period, for example, was a few centuries, because the ice didn't melt properly, it didn't melt evenly, and ended up like pooling in an ocean's worth of fresh water on top of Canada and Greenland, and then the holdings like broke, and it all flooded into the ocean at once, and disrupted the salination levels, and shut down the thermohaline circulation. So in so that's what happened with the Younger Dryas period, and the Earth cold snapped for back into an ice age for another few centuries, whereas it was warming up before that happened. So the system will reset itself. That's what it does. But also the entire like system has been mass killed before by various events, and it what we can affect is the what our decisions will affect is the regeneration time, not the actual like regeneration itself. Obviously, the fastest regeneration would be if we just Thanos snapped and all of us instantly dropped dead right here and now. Then, obviously, that would be like the fastest global recovery. However, that's not what's going to happen. There is going to be a lot of mass death in the upcoming decades. However, like the Earth's population is not going to reach the supposed 20 billion that James Cameron constantly portrays in his Avatar movies. Even the highest UN projections is only something like 12 billion, I think. But they've adjusted that now with like falling birth rates and everything, and increasing mortality because of various factors. So even they're now like readjusting their calculations to thinking that population is going to peak at like 10.3 billion. However, in reality, I would say it's more likely probably like 9.5, like between 9.4 and 9.6. Uh, what what was this? What was this? Like 6 people came in for like 2 seconds and then left. What is going on? Oh yeah, I probably should be talking about what the stream is titled, about future oil providers. Since we're in South America, I didn't tell you to zoom out that far. Stop it. Since we're in South America with a very disobedient Google Earth, uh, Argentina is actually probably going to become a net exporter again. Their production levels have already reached about 600,000 barrels per day, largely boosted up to that by the Vaca Muerta shale around here in the middle of the country. And the Vaca Muerta shale is about half the size in terms of how much oil it holds as the Permian shale in West Texas. So The only difference is that Argentina has more difficulty working on it because in the U.S. We we're the source of all the most experienced major oil industries, and also the Permian existed literally in the middle of West Texas, which was already full of oil infrastructure anyways because there was conventional oil there to begin with. Whereas the Vaca Muerta shale was kind of like just there. And I mean, Argentina had oil fields before, but they're kind of scattered throughout the place. So they've kind of had to build Vaca Muerta from the ground up. And so it's not like, shooting off the way Permian production did, but it is still climbing and it's going to keep climbing. It's going to have a stall for like a year or two soon, though, because they have to finish another pipeline because they're about to max out their pipeline delivery capacity. But once they get that new pipeline up, then they should be able to keep going. And they're up to about 600,000 barrels per day of total production nationwide versus their present day average consumption levels, which have basically leveled off at around 700,000 barrels per day for the last decade or so. So they're pretty soon going to become a net exporter again. And they also have all of this very nice low-lying offshore shelf. And uh, they're not going to because they're hopefully not that stupid. But it would be fascinating if they decided to try to go at the Falklands again after the 1980s incident. Because they want all the extension. Because the UK is already starting exploration and development around the Falklands around here. So it would be interesting if Argentina decided to try for it again somehow. But I'm gonna put some bold trust in them that they're not that stupid. Even though Britain is like militarily downsized since then and is constantly defanging itself to my disappointment, the they would still absolutely hammer Argentina again because Argentina, modern Argentina, basically doesn't even have an air force. It's kind of become like Mexico in that it has an air force in really, I'm putting that in really big air quotes, but its air force is like a handful of some jets that are typically used for training that they can you know duct tape some bombs to if they want. So no air force equals really no chance at anything. And even when they had one, it didn't really end well, anyways. But in terms of what they can access, Argentina probably does have a fair bit. But there hasn't really been that much exploration and development there over the course of time because Argentina has this habit of constantly. Actually, I can probably show you. Argentina has a habit of like constantly economically collapsing and then recovering for a little while and then constantly economically collapsing. Like GDP is not the best way to show it, but yeah, basically you then have to zoom in further to like show the equivalent impact of these in the past. But yeah, it basically has this effect of up crash, up crash, up crash, and it's been doing this since like the early 1900s. So oil industries don't tend to like economically unstable places either. Although they'll welcome them much more than they will welcome like violently unstable places like huge chunks of Africa and portions of the Middle East. Okay, we did that. Oh, yeah, and Paraguay is actually also going to start producing eventually, probably. Excuse me, obey my commands, computer, please. Hello. Hello, computer. There we go. Thank you. South America, South America, South America. Yeah, because you see this massive low-lying basin influx area where a deal of Argentina's oil was, although they also did stuff down in Tierra del Fuego, I think. It also extends into Paraguay. However, Paraguay has never actually like done anything. So what portion Paraguay might have has been like basically untouched this whole time. So, however, exploration and development has just begun in Paraguay by one or two firms, I think, this year. So we're going to see if they find any decent bit in Paraguay. Ecuador is basically done though, because Ecuador had a few fields over here with what little they had in terms of shelf and low-lying stuff in the west. However, most of their stuff was in their Amazon basin, which is kind of constricted and is basically maximally explored already. So basically, everything they could find has been found in terms of Ecuador. So their downtrend that they're on now is basically their final one. Uh, Peru never really did all that much. Peru probably still has a decent bit. However, in their case, I prefer they don't because that would require uh, decent bits of Amazon removal, which would be not good. Uh, Peru stick to mining silver and copper and everything because you have a bunch of it, and the mountains are mostly barren, so it's pretty good. And growing blueberries, I forgot because you guys grow the best blueberries, like unquestionably. Close the viewer talk map. I'll update that later. Check chat, since this is like the most active chat I've ever seen. Dang! What are you guys doing? What are you guys doing? There's like a million of you. Well, okay, there's like a million message. What are you doing? Uh, 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 sorry, I'm a doomer. I mean, you're like literally wrong. So, I mean, sure. Uh, we are doomed in the realist sense. Yes and no. In terms of what we want, like for the future, that's not going to exist. Like, there's no Star Trek. Not even Avatar is going to exist. We're not going to have the ISVs, and there is no Pandora with unobtainium for us to invade. The the future is not like it's not what am I thinking of? It's not some post-apocalyptic zombie wasteland, but it's also not what you've been presented with constantly, and it's also not even what like supposedly realistic future prediction people try to play it off as. People I used to like trust a long time ago, like that one famous physicist, Mikio Kaku. Like he is still going on with the flying car stuff. Like he is still adamant that flying cars are coming. Uh, I'd heavily disagree, Alex. I have over the course of time, I've had blueberries from uh, I don't know, probably like a dozen countries at this point. Peru is the only one who, well, for one, their blueberries are the best anyways, both in taste and in quality. And also, they're the only one that has stayed consistent. Like, I have had excellent blueberries from Mexico and excellent blueberries from Chile. However, they have they have never been consistent. Like, I've had one good batch from each, and then like other batches are like all wrinkled and like absolutely trash. So, like the only one who stays consistent is Peru. So, also, forewarning to anyone who's new, I guess, if you start getting like heavily like specific political, then you're going to end up getting banned. That's on the list of bannable things because I really don't want to put up with it. Like that. I'm surprised I've only had to ban one person, but like the one person I did have to ban in terms of on stream was someone who like started praising like politicians or whatever, and like doing campaign slogans. Granted, that's far from the only thing I will ban people for, but that is apparently on stream. That's the one people want to go for the most. At least in the comments on videos, usually the most common reason I X people out is for what I refer to as cringe trolling. What was I about to do? What was I about to do? Oh yeah, the list of future oil producing countries or countries that will be producing additional oil, the thing that the stream is supposedly about. Okay. We're done those, done those, done those. Where do we go to next? Yes. Go over here. If Google Earth feels like obeying me, one of the upcoming ones is now Namibia, which, as I expected, is starting to find decent oil deposits on its offshore shelf, and not in the Kavango Basin, which I when I downshot the Kavango Basin, I really got like downvoted and hammered for that. In my comments, like people telling me like I was the dumbest person on earth for not believing in the Kavango Basin. Yet the Kavango Basin has mysteriously gone nowhere. However, offshore Namibia is going somewhere. Uh, so actually, I'll wait another year or two for before I count that on my ratio of right calls versus wrong calls. But you know, maybe I should start adding. I should start including that one eventually. But they have started finding stuff offshore Namibia, which, given this really nice shelf arrangement, was to be expected. They, uh, yeah, like Angola had one, granted in kind of the opposite formation. However, theirs sort of cuts off once they head to the south. Although they do have a little bit right there that they have been doing stuff on now, because that's about the last bit that they can go for. Namibia has way more in accessibility and total area. I'd expect Namibia should be able, due to similar size, but more, just more being there in general. Namibia should at least be able to get up to or beyond Angola's peak, which was around 2 million barrels per day. I'd expect Namibia to be able to do more than that, though, and especially because it's the exploration and development isn't going to have a massive stall like Angola did because of various oil price crashes or just general reductions, like towards the end of the 90s, like I mentioned, for that affected Thailand as well as the exploration and development was going through the 80s and early 90s while oil prices were still really high, and a bunch of stuff was found in Angola, and it was developed over the course of time, and most of it came online in the 2000s, bringing Angola up to its initial 2 million barrels per day. However, after that, they didn't have much going on for a while because by the late 90s, oil prices crashed hard. And so that's they went into their decline, which they've only now been stalling as stuff that they discovered in the mid 2010s has been and later 2010s has been coming online to hold them off a bit. However, oil prices are, unless any more like abrupt demand collapse events come, massive oil prices, well, even those oil price crashes that like COVID caused only lasted like 1 year. So that wouldn't have the same effect anyways. But extremely elevated oil prices, for those who haven't caught on, are kind of a permanent feature of reality now. So the exploration and development in terms of offshore Namibia is not going to be having a massive decade-long halt like Angola did. So Namibia should be able to keep pushing upwards and be able to pull off higher numbers than Angola was able to. Now, supposedly there is also offshore exploration and developments going on offshore of South Africa, which should have some. However, even if they do, they're going to have issues because South Africa is kind of falling apart. And actually, that might be one of the that might South Africa might end up being a location that has some kind of military intervention from the outside world because 70+% of all our platinum group metals come from the Bushveld complex up there in the Limpopo province. So, and also 25% of the world's chromium supply, like 15% of the world's manganese supply. So, yeah, South Africa going down will cause issues that might cause responses from the outside world. And South Africa is already having issues without falling apart. It's having internal issues on its own already from its not being able to keep its power grid functioning because they have a huge internal corruption problem with their in their power industry, and particularly with the last president they had. He constantly like appointed his buddies as directors of the national like power grid company or whatever, and they would gradually, just like divert the money into their own bank accounts, and then he would like pretend to out them for the corruption and fire them and appoint someone new to replace them. But the person he appointed was just another buddy who would do the same thing and keep diverting the money to their own bank account. And so their power like industry has not had the available funding to do like reliable like maintenance you need to do to maintain a modern power grid. So it's constantly been failing, and they've been having like nationwide blackouts for sometimes as much as like 4 to 6 hours a day or something. And yes, that includes the mining operations. Although the mining operations have big spare generators that they can use, however, those are not infinite. Like they don't have an infinite supply of fuel on hand, and also their system is poorly arranged because for their power plants, most of them are coal fired. However, their coal fired power plants are not ideally set up. Like for example, ours are. I'll show you. Here we'll go to back up home, where I unfortunately have been away from for 3 years. I need funding to return. I will show you several different power plant setups, like our power plant. We zoom in here. All right, where's the yeah, our power plant here? The rail line comes in with the rail trucks of coal, and they come up and they go into the like belt system for feeding. This is actually the old power plants. I don't know why they haven't updated it with the new one yet. But yeah, the train lines come right in there, and even down in where my parents live, South Carolina, where I'm stuck at the moment, which is like one of the most poorly run U.S. states. You will zoom out, please. I need to go a big distance really fast. You will still actually see the same setup. I'll show you if we can zoom in here. Zoom, 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 zoom. Please, get off the screen. I'm trying to zoom in. I will show you. It's out here. Okay, that road. You go up there. I think it's. Is it here? No, that's the tire production plant. No, where's the power plant? Oh wait, am I way off? I think I'm way off potentially. Oh yeah, it's over here. Uh, is this it? I think yeah, because there's the coal pile. Even in a poorly run state, the rail line comes in and directly delivers the coal to the sorter, and you have the big coal pile that the power plant can run on. It's usually enough for like a few months in case stuff goes down. But in South Africa, if you look up like articles about their blackouts, you'll see these photos of their power plants, and you'll see these big fleets, these big convoys of like uh big a billion big dump trucks, big like haul trucks. Yes, literally like medium-sized haul trucks and big dump trucks is how they transport the coal to their power plants. The coal comes instead of having the railway go to the coal plant, they have like the coal come to a distribution center miles away from the coal plant and then truck the coal to the coal plant. So that is exorbitantly expensive in case you couldn't figure it out. So on top of having no money to begin with because of all the corruption and funding diversions, they also like way overshoot costs more than like any other country that uses coal does, because every other country is smart enough to just have the rail line go directly underneath the plant itself. So I suspect that arrangement was probably because of like some secret deal between like South African government officials and like some of the trucking companies or something, so that the trucking companies would always have contracts. But yeah, so uh, that is one of various things stacking on South Africa's problems. And whoa, I didn't tell you to turn. Why is it doing all this? But anyways, going on even further, another one where additional petroleum will still be coming from, and in even greater amounts, is Canada. And yes, primarily, at least for the time being, from Alberta, from the tar sand formations, as people initially think of like the tar sand mining stuff, but that's not where most of it comes from. Most of it is from steam assistance wells, where they drill under the tar sands and they inject steam, and the steam goes up through it and ends up like sorting out the actual liquid petroleum from it, which then drains through through rifts that the steam opens into the pumps that then actually take it up to the surface. And Canada has just been spamming wells across the tar sands recently, so their production will be going up in times to come. And also, they have quite a bit of expansion potential. There is likely some bits up in the Mackenzie River area, and there's also actually quite a fair chance that there's some in this inland basin area as well, and even the Hudson Bay region. However, that's never really been touched. Most of their stuff was initially some stuff in Ontario, like I think around there, and then they started doing stuff out in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and eventually out in Alberta, where they found the tar sands. And nowadays, they also have some stuff offshore from Newfoundland as well, around like here. And also, yes, this semi-enclosed basin here might have a fair bit. And then also, though shared with Greenland, there is the prolific looking, very appealing looking Baffin Bay formation here, which and especially here, the mouth where it comes out into the Atlantic is a very nice setup as well. However, all of that will depend. Also, uh, the granted we won't be exporting it, we're just going to consume it ourselves. The U.S. will actually still be producing more petroleum as we go forward. There is additional like shale expansion coming still, and additional areas of the Gulf that have not been fully gone into, plus the Western Florida Shelf area, and this particular half bowl on the East Continental Shelf. Uh, granted, granted, how much is there remains to be seen, but it should be some bit. It's not going to keep us up at like 13 million barrels a day or anything, but it is additional oil beyond what is already in production. And also up home in Alaska, there is quite a bit remaining. Despite the small size of the area, it has proven, the North Slope has proven quite prolific. Basically, Smith Bay is over here, this tiny little thing that you can't really see. And there's a huge field there that stuff is just starting on, but it probably won't come into production until like 2026 or 2027. And the industry is gradually working its way across the tundra, gradually stepping its way westward slowly. And despite all everyone knows about is Prudhoe, and then thinks that there's literally like nothing else and has been nothing else since then, we actually keep finding stuff like every few miles further westward that we go up there, and a fair bit of it is coming online over the next couple of years. So it should be bringing us back up from 500 to about 600 or 650,000. And then once Smith Bay comes online in the later 2020s, that'll jump up towards like 850 or 900,000, and then plus whatever else is out there. And some offshore stuff here. We do know there are three things there, at least because oil companies were checking that out earlier. We'll have to switch over to the Arctic topographic thing. Yeah, this one is better because it's not just a blur. It actually shows like some specifics. So you can see actual differentials there and a bit of a basin here that we share with the Chukotka region of Russia. So stuff has already been found there, just no one's gone back to it or done anything yet. Because when they were doing that, that was back during triple-digit oil price times, back in the early 2010s. Then the oil prices collapsed afterwards. And so should probably check chat now since you guys are talking like a billion miles a minute. Dang. What are you guys doing in here? Okay, I think this is where I stopped. Making oil from our waste, that's a no yield situation. That would intake more energy than it would actually yield us. In terms of continuing to provide liquid fuel, but not adding additional like emissions to the atmosphere, we like biofuel exists. It's a thing we can do. It's not even difficult. It has been constantly it has been constantly like suppressed by the regular fossil fuel industry. Uh, and you can see it basically in the patterns of every time it comes up, and it looks like the government in the U.S. at least is going to give more like research and development grants into that field. All of the sudden, you will never hear about it again, and those grants will just not be given because behind the scenes, politicians are being paid off to not give said grants, just like they've done with many other things. Uh, like technically, they're actually the ones behind the nuclear fears, the nuclear scaremongering as well. Despite people not really initially thinking to connect the two, they're actually the ones that are majorly responsible for funding that. So in terms of biofuel, it doesn't have anywhere as near a net energy yield as regular fossil hydrocarbons, obviously. However, it's decent enough. Most of them, done in the best ways, get like between 7 and 10 for a net energy yield. Whereas like some petroleum sources that we might resort to, like thicker heavy oil or thicker like tar sands themselves, go as low as like only 5. So it is better than some The main thing also would be pricing because biodiesel is the cheapest because you don't have to do too much to the original source material to get it. The best source for it would be canola or rapeseed, uh, and it would come out to something like $4.50 a gallon. Biogasoline you can do from corn stalks and wheat stalks or wheat stems, I mean, aka the part that is agricultural waste that normally we don't use or we grind it up into like animal feed or whatever. Biogasoline would average around $6 a gallon, and biojet fuel is the one that would be the most expensive. The best source of that is algae, and biojet fuel is usually upwards of like $8. The Air Force and the Navy have actually already like fully developed the algae to jet fuel process because they as a national security measure, they want to ensure that they do have a available constant supply of jet fuel in the event of any kind of like major attacks or supply cutoffs. So that one at least actually has been fully developed. It's just not in use really by anyone other than the U.S. Air Force and U.S. Navy, and probably secretly the Chinese military as well. I wouldn't be too surprised. You can also do ethanol from sugarcane, but it's not the best fuel in terms of energy density to use. Gasoline, or as its actual name is heptane, as it's the seven carbon chain. Heptane is the best one to use, either heptane or diesel. Diesel being a shortened name for distillate fuel oil, which is not a single type of chain. It's usually a mixture of carbon chain lengths between 12 and 18. And then jet fuel is heavily refined no sulfur kerosene, which is specifically uh, decahexane, specifically a 16 carbon chain, as that using anything else for turbofan or turbojet engines really ends badly. But for some reason, with decahexane, they run like incredibly well, but everything else they just like reject it. Although, granted, you can run them on it, but it doesn't tend to end all that well, like I said. All right. This is the most active chat I've ever seen. Dang. Bus as well. No human alive on the planet by 2020. What? Who is saying this? What? All right, this is like absurdly delusional levels of stuff. That's not even like normal doomer stuff. That's just like that's like delusional. That's like on Peter Zion's level. Like when he was saying that like hundreds of millions of people or whatever were gonna starve this winter, and like no, they didn't. 1 to 2 million people did starve, but not like some absolutely obscene number in comparison to like what he claimed at least. Stay down, thank you. Uh, uh corn uh corn ethanol isn't like a legitimate thing to use though. That's not what the countries that rely on ethanol fuel like Brazil doesn't. heavily anymore. Like I think a quarter of their cars still are ethanol vehicles, but most of them are back to like gasoline now. They basically switched over to ethanol during the massive OPEC oil production mega cuts, the OPEC like embargo during the 70s and 80s. That's when Brazil like majorly switched over it. But they do their ethanol from sugarcane, which is much better. Corn ethanol has like a 1.2 net energy yield, whereas sugarcane ethanol has like 7 to 9, depending on the particular species of sugarcane, how thick it grows and stuff. Uh, yeah, I'm still a bit surprised that people are really still buying into his Mars stuff. I do actually still get like Elon Musk mega stands in my comments sometimes, telling me about the usual like blah blah blah, how I don't I'm just failing to comprehend his amazing genius. Uh, you know, and no matter how much of like the fact that he's not an inventor, he's an investor who invested in the inventions of actual scientists. Like you can bring that up a million times, it never has any effect. But they still show up. They still do show up. Uh, who else have we not gone through? Blah 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 blah. Oh, Libya actually is has a decent bit, and even Tunisia, but not too much in Tunisia's case, because Libya and Italy, their maritime control like cuts off there. Libya actually has a decent offshore setup that they could be going into if they were stable. They also have if I can get this to switch again, they also do have their very decent onshore setup. I mean, which already gave them various fields, uh, several up here, some right there, and then more down in these two circular like impression areas down here. And they never actually completely explored everything, so there is still likely some undiscovered stuff there. However, in terms of just how much they have in general, they have enough to where they could produce a fair bit, like at a higher plateau, something closer to like 3 million barrels per day or even higher for quite a number of decades further, because they have quite a bit. The only thing is, even if they were like fully developed and they were completely stable, their fields do not have the volumetric output capacity that like the Persian Gulf fields do. So that restricts like their total maximum like output plateau they could maintain. However, that does end up also with the result that they could then obviously maintain such a plateau much longer than others. Uh, so Libya is that stuff is eventually going to be seen, because as other resources get contracted, if Libya doesn't stabilize on its own, or if Turkey's secret intervention that they've been doing doesn't work things out, Libya is going to get like actually intervened on this time. And I don't I not like last time where the coalition was just like shooting down Gaddafi's attack helicopters and bombing some tanks. It would end up it would end up being like an actual like on land intervention, because because stuff would like have to be set up and assured that it would keep going. Egypt does have a decent bit of unexplored stuff in the Western Desert. This like basin area right here and a bit down there. They basically haven't really touched it. most of their stuff that they've done has been, I believe, right around there in that one particular basin and along the Nile and just offshore of it. And they've been pushing further offshore of the Nile into their Mediterranean waters, which they have a nice fan of, and a fan at the base of a river delta, which is a really good setup, as you've seen with Nigeria. They don't likely have as much as Nigeria, but they do likely have a fair bit, especially in that Western Desert Basin area that I just showed you. And they have been doing more exploration and development there as time has gone on. They just discovered two additional fields, I believe, last year in 2022. Not too big, like I think both put together are like 500 million barrels or something. Offshore in the Mediterranean, it has mostly been gas that they found. However, that kind of falls in line in obviously the same category as basically we might as well just include future gas producers as well. So Egypt is going to increase as a gas producer as they start expanding into the Mediterranean, and also they're going to rebound a bit as an oil producer, just probably not too much. They might become a net exporter again if they explore and develop stuff quickly enough, but it'll depend. Their domestic consumption levels have flatlined around 800,000 barrels per day as they've kind of economically stagnated, like a number of other countries have for the past decade or so. Similar to like how Pakistan over there, they reached something like about 500,000 barrels per day, and they've basically been stuck there ever since because they've economically been constrained ever since. And they were just starting to boost up again in terms of economic development. However, then that all got like stalled out by the giga floods this year. And obviously, while we're here in the Middle East, Iraq is, as I constantly say, in terms of the Persian Gulf nations, we'll go over to the topographic maps. Persian Gulf, the Persian Gulf. You see here, as I've explained previously, the Persian Gulf is like the perfect oil setup, which is why it became the region that it is. It has a semi-enclosed, massively low-lying basin area that is a major inlet from the ocean at large. So where algae and phytoplankton could come in and have mass die-offs and be buried under sediment in, because it wouldn't be as like majorly majorly like affected by currents like the outside ocean is. So it had that kind of perfect setup, and also it is a massive desert. The whole Arabian area is a massive desert, and it is a wind sand desert, which is different from water-worn sand, aka industrial grade sand, the only sand we can use for construction and stuff. Wind sand is useless except in the except in forming sandstone over time, forming really light porous layers of sandstone rock, which is what the Persian Gulf is full of, which is why it was able to hold so much of the petroleum and gas that formed in it. And Iraq has the most legitimately remaining because Iraq has actually like uh legit Iraq has actually been straightforward about their reserves over the course of time. They haven't like all the others stated a number and then insisted that their reserves have stayed at that number and never changed in over 40 years. Because Iraq initially like didn't even have that much exploration and development after the early 1900s and then the 50s and the 60s, because Iraq, if we go and show by example, Iraq has been through repeated periods of extensive disruptive chaos, as you can see by these constant collapses. And people usually say Iraq 2003 was about oil, but they tend to not really know what that exactly means. And what it actually means is Saddam, in the view of the greater global order, had to be removed because the all of this he was priorly responsible for. The global order would be perfectly fine with him like just killing a bunch of people because you know Syria was allowed to happen, Yemen is allowed to happen, Myanmar is allowed to happen. Although Myanmar will be having stuff done soon enough, probably, if it doesn't settle itself out. Uh, Yeah, because here some did the Iran-Iraq War, things recovered, then he invaded Kuwait, got trashed, and stuff stayed down. He tried recovering stuff, but it didn't really work. Everything was constantly shutting off because after the defeat in the first Gulf War, he went mega paranoid dictator mode and started mass executions and disappearings, and that's kind of scared a lot of people out of the country, as it tends to do. And as you've seen with Russia, the people who flee a nation going down a dark path are people who tend to have money to flee the nation. And in Iraq's case, the people with money were those in the oil industry, the petroleum engineers and the like. So that caused issues, and eventually it culminated in the decision of, all right, this isn't going to stop. This up down pattern is just going to keep going as long as he's alive. So he has to be gotten rid of, and so that is the actual how/why of Iraq was about oil, because yes, it was, but that is the actual like intricate reasoning, because the former government of Iraq had to be removed in order to allow Iraq to actually have a constant output and actually go higher up. As you can see, they've been constantly getting up towards like 5. However, here OPEC called or technically Saudi Arabia, since OPEC is basically Saudi Arabia's will, called for the long-term production cuts in the later 2010s. Then the COVID demand crashed production cuts. Then they came back up. However, Saudi Arabia called for new production cuts because they needed an excuse to lower their production back down because otherwise Saudi Arabia would have eventually exposed that their production ceiling, their highest capability, is not as high as they brag it to be and is actually much lower. So now these new cuts are constraining Iraq once again. However, uh, if said conditions were removed, and even if they're not, Iraq might eventually just middle finger Saudi Arabia anyways, as OPEC, if you've noticed over the years, has been gradually falling apart. Members have been departing because they don't really want to go along with the whole thing anymore. Iraq has one of the best parts of the setup of the Persian Gulf arrangement, and has again a huge amount of like unexplored, unsurveyed portions, and a lot of what has been discovered there hasn't even really been developed because that development has constantly been disrupted. With what is there already, with what is known, they could go up to 7 million barrels per day, and they want to. They keep, or at least they said they want to, which was kind of a mistake that kind of put them in Saudi Arabia's crosshairs to not allow for such, because Saudi Arabia doesn't want competition. That's why Saudi Arabia like constantly supports all the stuff against Iran, because uh, they don't want they don't want Iran ever potentially returning to their capable 6 million barrel per day plateau. They they don't want Iraq actually going up to what they're capable of. They're fine with Kuwait because Kuwait can only really maintain 3 to 4 million barrels per day. They're fine with Qatar because Qatar is more of a gas thing than an oil thing, and they're fine with the UAE because the U.S. told them to be fine with the UAE because uh, the U.S. and the collective orders goal is to maintain a global oil supply, and Saudi Arabia's like constant funding of various groups in, say, Yemen and even Somalia to constantly dissuade further like oil developments is starting to get in the way of stuff, and so the sort of techno Viking point finger has been like given to them a few times now about hey, 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 knock it off, because that's starting to become an issue. However, they're still pushing for it because they still want their oil market dominance. So as long as Iraq remains in OPEC, which I actually don't think they will for like too long. They probably will still remain in for like a few more years at least, but I don't think they're actually sticking around forever because what OPEC is has kind of become apparent to the other members. And also, like countries outside of OPEC participate in the production cuts too. So, like, you don't have to be in OPEC to like take part in them. It's not like really necessary. And if you're in OPEC, it's actually more disadvantageous than being outside of it because if if you disobey the rules, then OPEC, in terms of the financial suppliers, which in this case is Saudi Arabia and the UAE, can cut you off from their like shared loan program or whatever they have. So, although granted, leaving OPEC would also have that same effect, but it would have the effect on Iraq's own terms instead of being cut off at the whims of Saudi Arabia and or slash the UAE. But yeah, Iraq could at present go up to 7 million barrels per day, and if they actually like had full exploration and development and started finding everything that is likely in there, they likely have the capability of reaching for something like 9, maybe potentially higher than that, but it would depend. However, Saudi Arabia is interested in keeping them like below 5, at least as much as they can. So we'll have to see how that goes. And I should probably check chat because I've been rambling for like 20 straight minutes. Dang, man. What is with you guys today, really? Hold on. Here we go. Where are we? Where do we start? Okay, here we go. Okay, I think this is it. Elon Musk never delivers. True. That's like a 200% Max Rogier approved statement. Underground traffic jam. Well, okay, yes, I guess he delivered those. Uh, no, no, they don't. Uh, they they have. I should have it here somewhere. Uh, where is it? Oh yeah. Uh, Saudi Arabia had a lot in the beginning, as the other OPEC members did. I think I have a better one. Where's the big jumper? I think. I guess this is. I had a better one, but I don't know what happened to it. All right, you guys are gonna have to settle for this one. But yeah, Saudi Arabia has depleted way more than they would ever say because they've been pumping 10 million barrels a day as their general average for about 4 decades now. Uh, Now, the thing about the jump here is before this, it was better in OPEC to say that you have less oil. When they hit the late 80s, they changed their policies and it became more beneficial to admit to having greater oil. Now, something right around here and here for like each of the others, I do actually believe they that they did have that much oil. These were their actual reserve numbers when they said this initially. Like they initially, it has not stayed 268 billion barrels for the past 4 decades with them pumping out 10 million barrels a day. But initially, when they first said that, yes, they probably did have something akin to that amount. However, uh, they they are quite a ways down now, and the likely end of their ability to maintain a 10 million barrel per day plateau is going to come around at the present rate 2030 or so, possibly 2031. Given they pushed it a bit farther out with their over compliance with the especially the mega COVID production cuts when they cut down to like only 8 million barrels per day for a year. So that pushed their end of plateau capability date range further out, but it's still coming. And they had some bumps. The bumps were from legitimate finds there, but otherwise they just kept it like exactly flat. I don't know why they would admit to the bumps and then just remove them and go back to the flat line. If you're gonna lie, why not just consistently keep lying the exact same thing? Like don't be like inconsistent about it. But they have found additional oil since then, just nothing of like serious size comparatively. I think they did find a 9 billion barrel field down in the southeastern part of the country, but apart from that, everything has been like 3 billion barrel fields here or there, mostly offshore. And they've explored about half of their offshore territory or so. So they still could find some more stuff and like push things off a bit further. But as things are set now, they are likely going to be the first one to fall, so to speak. However, as I have said in many videos, what I suspect they're going to do is uh, before they would actually like start declining from a 10 million barrel per day plateau, they're going to start intentionally dropping down to like 9.5 or 9 million barrels a day, and then 8.5 or 8, like consistently doing that on purpose and saying publicly that they're doing it they're doing it out of their own goodwill to help maintain oil prices conducive to further exploration and development globally. That's going to be their line for how they're going to try to conceal their end of plateau, at least for as long as they can do it for. And also India is going to be coming up on the list as well, as India has a full, nice inset plane here that it shares with Pakistan. Granted, not a lot's going to happen in Pakistan because Pakistan's falling apart, but India has all this likely petroleum bearing area that it hasn't really done anything with. Like some stuff has been done off and on over the course of the decades. Most stuff was recent in the last couple decades, and a lot of it was here, right at the shore of Gujarat and offshore. And then they also have all this other offshore stuff too, and this little Illuminati triangle basin here. So India and exploration and development has actually started in major amounts in India just recently over this last year. Obviously, being fueled by the massive triple-digit oil price spikes. So India is actually still likely to have quite a bit undiscovered. However, it's not going to be an exporter. It is going to consume everything it finds on its own, as its production at the moment has declined down to about 600,000 barrels a day from the fields that it already has discovered, and their domestic oil consumption is already up to usually around like 5. it's been a bit depressed for the last couple of years since COVID. Bangladesh has this nice, really super low-lying inland basin formation here with a bit of an offshore extension. The issue, and part of the same issue for India actually, with exploration and development there, has been because it's so densely populated. It's kind of difficult to like do a lot of oil and gas development stuff because that does require having room. That's why, like in the U.S., for example, all the developments in like western Texas or up on the North Slope, back up home in Alaska, is done so easily because there's no one there. You're not like getting in anybody's way. Bangladesh probably does have a fair bit, although from initial findings, it looks like they would be more in line with Egypt, as it looks like they would have more gas than oil. But there's the dense population problem. The same with India, actually, because the nice low-lying plain, their big fertile plain, because of what it is, happens to be where like a huge chunk of their population is located. So that's a bit of an issue for them, obviously. And then uh, neighboring, excuse me, bring me the arrows. There we go. Neighboring Myanmar. Myanmar, you can see, has a nice inland reaching, semi-enclosed, actually majorly semi-enclosed. Uh, Not really a bowl in this case, more like a weird, awkwardly bent spoon, I guess you could call it. Low-lying formation that likely has a fair bit in it, and especially this low-lying river mouth area and this offshore like semi-bowl that it has. The issue with Myanmar, as you can probably imagine, from the multi-way civil wars that it has constantly going on. Granted, the different sides have united at the moment against the government in Yangon, and actually the resistance has taken almost complete control of two of the large north and northwestern provinces, which is awesome. Uh, but yeah, Myanmar, and similar to Texas and Louisiana, which, if you remember back in the early 1900s and late 1800s, when initial oil use and oil exploration was like really starting, oil was literally like seeping up in certain places. Myanmar had those same indications when like British explorers were going through there in the late 1800s and early 1900s. There were many locations in Myanmar where there was actual oil seepage coming to the surface. So the indicators are clearly there that there is some fair bit, and some development in Myanmar was done. Initially, it was started in the early 1900s, but then World War II happened, and so that all stopped. And then after World War II happened, the whole decolonization and breakup of the British Empire was going on. And then after that, exploration and development went on in Myanmar for a little bit, and they got a few fields discovered and got up to like 50,000 barrels per day briefly in I think the 60s. It might have been the 70s. However, then Myanmar entered its downward spiral into constantly being in and out of like a five-sided civil war. So that's been their story ever since then, and that's why there's been virtually no exploration and development for oil and gas in Myanmar ever since then, because no one wants to go and do stuff in an active war zone, and they're especially like deterred from it when it's been an active war zone for like 4 decades now. Oh, and next to them, you can see Thailand has a nice kind of similar feature and with multiple rivers and has very shallow offshore waters, which the rivers drain into, which is a very good indicator. And Thailand had a wave of exploration and development in the 80s and 90s until oil prices collapsed in the late 90s.
And then all those fields were brought online by the 2000s, which brought Thailand up to their like 250,000 barrel per day rough plateau that they maintained up until about 2020. And from there, they've been going down. However, exploration and development has returned to Thailand starting in the late 2010s, and they've discovered a few things, but that's because they haven't been doing too much. So I would easily suspect there's probably still a fair bit to be found onshore and offshore in Thailand. So we'll have to see how that all goes.
Down to five. I've gradually driven everyone away. Awesome. Well, it wasn't just one Pakistan flood, it was multiple floods combining to inundate over a third at one particular time. At one particular time, a third of the country was under some amount of water. Granted, like for most of that area, it was gone pretty quick, and it was down to a specific like 5 to 10% of the country was then still under water for like weeks to come after that. But at one particular snapshot moment, over 30% of the country was under like at least an inch of water. Oh yeah, Iran's oil exports have gone up, like I said in the OPEC video, a bit at least, because their consumption has dropped because of the unrest and uprising going on recently. However, multiple times the oil industry workers have actually like walked out from the job and joined protesters in several like coastal and ports terminal cities. So there's a chance that might end up coming into play and starting to drag things down in terms of their output. But we'll have to see. Well, how much have you guys been saying? Yeah, the thing with Myanmar, Myanmar's heavily dependent. I was actually surprised that China didn't like try to forcibly stabilize things themselves while they still have the capability to, or while China was still internally stable itself, because it's started to go past that tipping point now a bit earlier than I was expecting it to. But it's started going over that tipping point. So the actual window for China to have done something might be gone. They're most that if they do any major military moves, it's most likely all just going to be into a desperate grab for Taiwan for the whole restoration of imperial glory thing to try to save the CCP as things start getting worse. Again, as I've said before, if they go for it, they almost certainly will because they have to go before 2027 or like at the latest 2027 because we changed our plans Uh, after Russia invaded Ukraine, we switched up our plans. Eventually, we were going to start giving Taiwan like modern U.S. military stuff in 2027. However, however, now we've switched stuff up, and we're already starting to give Taiwan stuff. Like this year, we're going to start giving them HIMARS, so they could hammer incoming landing ships with. And 20, next year, 2025, we're going to start giving them Abrams tanks, and we're also about to start handing them off uh, the most recent updated F-16s, where and several other stuff I forgot in particular, but we're starting to do that now actually. So now it's like now China would have to do it like soon before Taiwan has too much, because Taiwan it would already go badly. Like they would already face plant, uh, especially just from the fact that it's a that it's a that it's like 100 mile distance naval invasion alone. That alone is basically doomed from the start. Uh, like the reason we succeeded on D-Day was, for one, because the distance was really short. The English Channel is not that wide, and two, because the Nazis had already been getting pounded and weakened so much for years at that point, whereas Taiwan hasn't. Obviously, instead they've had 7 or 8 decades to constantly build stuff up in preparation for what they've seen as the inevitable, and also because back then when we did D-Day, the only thing you had against an incoming naval assault as it was on its way was artillery fire, which is back then especially wasn't that precise. Now it can be a lot more precise, but it's still not as good as precision guided munitions, as missiles. So nowadays, trying to do something like that, especially across that distance, where you are going to be in transit for hours with the enemy, where the enemy can literally just like rain down missiles on you, that's literally a suicide run. But do I still think they're potentially going to try it? Yeah, because Russia trying Ukraine was already like that was going to fail, just like it has, and like Putin did it anyways. Despite supposedly being smart. I was even fooled. I used to consider him a smart person, but apparently he isn't. Uh, even supposedly smart people are given to delusions, and so yeah, I don't doubt China would try it anyways, even though they should like have the intelligence to realize that it's only going to end one way, with basically the loss of something like half of their military capacity, and not and a not addition of Taiwan to their map. And that then is going to further the flames of all of the stuff that's already started inside of China with the CCP's other fabulous decisions that they've been making over the last 10 years or so, and particularly all of their post-COVID decisions, which have been even more like prized level intellect. Oh, and technically China also is on that list too, because of the Bohai Bay and the Yellow Sea. Uh, Relatively untouched for the most part. They have started going off into the Bohai Bay for oil now. The reason that they have avoided that up until this point, in terms of oil and gas exploration, is because of such a density of shipping traffic, that there's always a risk when you do stuff like that in the midst of such shipping traffic. But China's hungry for oil, so they're going to take the risks now because they need the oil, and otherwise they'd be perpetually dependent on the Persian Gulf, which is For them, not the best position to be in, and Psych does not want to cooperate with my touchpad. Don't make me get out my physical mouse, please. Don't make me do it.
Don't make me do it.
Google Earth, I will do it. I will get out my physical mouse. Okay. Oh, now you're listening. Good. Yeah. The most likely outcome, at least as we see it now, is we we would I think it's the Seventh Fleet is the carrier group that we have around Taiwan. We would lose the Seventh Fleet in most simulations. We including the supercarrier and all 13 or 14 escorting warships. And in exchange, we end up destroying like 60 to 70 of China's warships. And we basically annihilate their air force at the cost of 200 to 300 of our own fighter craft, which is a decent enough ratio. 200 exchanging a couple hundred in order to wipe out about 1,600. That's actually a really decent ratio. Uh, however, despite what Biden or Washington says, it's not likely we would actually directly intervene. We would just uh, let China faceplant itself, because those losses that we take in that simulation are not necessary. Like the invasion will just fail in its own right, because you just can't do this. It's not something that's feasible. So uh, we almost certainly will just we will flood Taiwan with everything they well, I'll say not will, we already are. We likely have already sent like the first HIMARS shipments, but haven't said anything publicly. We will flood Taiwan with everything they need themselves and let them handle it. Uh, they will still uh, Taiwan itself will still take massive losses, because they are still going to have a huge barrage of incoming like surface to surface missiles from China. However, Taiwan is not like an undefended rock. They have they have quite a few missile defense systems. Granted, they are kind of aging. There's stuff we gave them in like the 80s, I believe. So we are. Oh yeah, stuff. It's probably like Nissan's stuff is and what we're sending them along with the other stuff. So we were going to be giving them more modern stuff. So it's not like everything coming in is going to hit. However, a lot of it is going to hit. But they in a similar manner to or from a different angle as to how Ukraine avoided like having its air force destroyed in so many of Russia's strikes by just uh, scattering them to like different airfields. After we gave them the our intelligence, which was that Russia's surveillance satellites don't really work. They're kind of a farce, because that if they worked, then Russia would actually constantly have up to date satellite imagery of like repositioned assets, but they don't. So somebody's lying here. Russia, are you did you send up working satellites, but they broke, or did you just send up some big bricks into orbit and told us that they were a web of surveillance satellites? Similar to avoiding mass destruction on initial strikes via a different means, Taiwan actually has a insanely impressive like network of bunker tunnels built throughout the islands, connected to all kinds of different runways and improvised airstrips. So, and it's not like a one tunnel system like at an airfield or whatever. There's just a tunnel that goes into a mountain. Each one, at least in a particular region of Taiwan, a particular area, is connected to the others. So that like if say enough hits like an area that the tunnel like exit collapses or something, they can literally tow the aircraft through the network inside to like a different tunnel exit and launch from a different airstrip. So they are already actually like prepared for the like first strike wave of incoming like guided missiles and stuff, and they will also they'll have look they'll have preemptive stuff to launch strikes at like the incoming landing vessels. Granted, not everything they launch at the incoming landing vessels will hit either, except for their submarine stuff, because they do have very good, very stealth submarines. They have actually out stealthed us a couple of times in training exercises. So, in the event of the oncoming invasion, they will likely park themselves and wait in specific points, and then just basically because it will give your position away once you start launching them. Basically, sacrifice themselves by just like constantly one after another emptying their entire torpedo complements and sinking every incoming vessel they can lock to. Uh, Although China does have an issue that's going to give them problems in that since they're going to have to do this if they do intend to, they're going to have to do this like before 2027 or so. They're not going to have time to actually build up a legitimate amphibious assault fleet like they intended to. So they're going to have to use what they have and use retrofitted civilian ferries, which with our, unlike Russia's, our actual functioning surveillance satellites have already seen them doing in various port cities in the Fujian province. We have already seen them practicing retrofits and like doing rapid loadings of military personnel and vehicles onto them. And we've literally seen them practicing basically bolting mobile like SAM units onto the upper decks of civilian ferries, so that they'll have an improvised anti-air system as they're crossing. So we've already seen them prepping, or I guess practicing for preparation, practicing in order to be able to prepare for it whenever they decide to do it. The most likely time frame, if they still have a modicum of intelligence, is during the fall. They would have to do it during fall because that's when the strait is calmest. Whatever year they do it, it will have to be fall because that's when the waters are calmest. And when the waters are most level and calm, that means the journey would be the shortest, only about 6 hours or so, and thus that would mean only 6 hours where torpedoes are coming at you and incoming munitions are raining down on you from the shore. So if they're smart, they would do it sometime in fall. I'm pretty sure it's spring is the opposite. Spring is when it's like the worst, and it would be like a 10-hour journey across the strait. But during fall, particularly late fall, like November, it would only be a 6-hour journey. But even at only a 6-hour journey, that's the whole thing is still not going to work. It's what's going to happen is you're going to not get Taiwan, and instead both you and Taiwan are going to get a bunch of dead people. Uh, I mean, anybody can build nukes quick enough if they're given the like the if they're given the capability to do so, which I mean we could give them if that's the implication he's giving, I guess. If we gave them the capability to do so, then yeah, they could assemble them pretty quickly. I mean, if we intended to do that, it would be easier to just give them some of our warheads. We'd have to do some like refitting though, some like reprogramming of the onboard stuff, so that they could use them. Because at the moment, like everything's obviously specifically designed for to just be used by us. But I mean, yeah, we could give them the capability to do so. We could give them the designs. They don't uh, they they don't have they don't have a enrichment facility of the kind that you need. Yeah, someone's obnoxious dog is barking outside. Of the kind that you would need to refine that much refine the uranium to the degree of the kind to use in nuclear weapons, though. So they would have to build that, and that takes time and is also very obvious. I'm giving China the benefit of the doubt and assuming that their surveillance satellites are actually real. Uh, I mean, I'm also assuming that their military tech is and their military itself is also real and competent. Which I mean, I used to think that about Russia, but that was clearly a mistake. So I might be wrong, but I'm going to keep giving China the benefit of the doubt until they potentially prove me otherwise. So for the moment, I'm going to still keep assuming. But yeah, that would take a while to build though that kind of enrichment facility. And if China's surveillance satellites are real, like I'm going to assume they are, that would be seen really easily. So we would have to give them the enriched uranium, which I mean, at that point, like I said, it would be easier to just give them nuclear warheads, like just straight up. I don't think we're going with that option, though. I think instead of deterrence, again, me saying things is not like I want X to happen. This is just how I like am viewing the situation from the U.S. as a political entity, from a geopolitics standpoint. Uh, I'm pretty sure we're seeing the better option is to actually let the invasion happen and let China like go through with it and faceplant in the same way that we probably could have deterred Russia. However, we let Russia do it, and actually, kind of, I think we even probably prodded them into it on purpose because unlike me, those like high up in the military who actually have access to stuff probably knew that Russia's military was actually a piece of crap and knew that something like this would happen, and so uh, they wanted that to happen so that Russia would humiliate itself and basically undergo a reduction to little more than a regional power who has nukes, most of which are likely not maintained because Russia's entire military budget isn't even enough to match the maintenance of their supposed nuclear arsenal. Like it's not even enough to cover half of it, and they clearly spent some deal of that tiny budget on other military stuff. So that's even more that's not actually being spent on their nukes, which is a makes you wonder kind of moment. But in China's case, similarly, I think uh, U.S. like decision makers have probably decided the best angle is to let China do it so that they similarly have a blow up in your face moment, and that removes them from the you could call it competitor stage, I guess, and then thusly the only ones left on said competitor stage would be the collective Europe, who is our friend, uh, India potentially in the future, but they don't really have anything against us. And the only one who really is going to be doing anything, uh, Turkey. Uh, and Turkey is actually going to start wandering off and doing some stuff. I'll cover that in yet another video at some point. We are going to end up at war with Turkey at some point over most likely over Iraqi oil and control and influence over the region. Because Turkey's made it kind of clear they want to go down the Ottoman restoration route, which is like all these other imperial restoration things. It's kind of suicidal, but for some reason, like everybody with every such decision, like everybody is quote unquote just going for it now. Apparently, like with every crazy thing you could think, everyone's like, well, everyone else is doing it. Everyone else is invading X and doing Y. Why don't we jump in? Let's get in on it. So, yeah, they're starting down that road now, and like no, like the list of everyone who's just like doing whatever now is starting to grow. Granted, doing whatever is constantly ending in really hard backfires, but no one really cares about that when making the initial decision. Over consolidation by China in what way? Over consolidation of what? Do you mean like power? Like government mega surveillance and stuff like that? Like becoming a 1984 disciplinary superstate? In that case, yes, like that. There's no scenario where that doesn't blow up on you. Like ironically, unlike modern Russia, the USSR, the USSR was actually like intelligent. Like you can the best way to compare the two is their lies. Like the lies that Russia constantly tells now is like always absurd stuff. Like oh we have killed 2 million Ukrainian soldiers and we've shot down 5 bajillion Bayraktar drones, even though not even 300 were ever manufactured and Turkey only ever gave Ukraine 20. The versus like the USSR usually told like cleverly crafted, really believable lies, and they actually convinced the outside world of many of their lies. But versus like modern Russia is who literally just like says whatever somebody just like comes up with on the fly, and just like puts it up on the proper channels. And like half the time the stuff's like what, like like even those of you who like are supposed to believe what you're saying can't even possibly believe what you're saying. There's but tying this back into the China over consolidation thing. Yeah, like if you start going too far, then it will blow up in your face. It always will and always has. The USSR actually understood that, and that's why post Stalin they went away from going down that path. They were still a very heavy-handed like surveillance big brother state, but they were not like to the extent that uh they were not like to the extent that China is doing, because they were actually like smart enough to realize you couldn't really go that far without pushing people over the edge. Uh, good. Russia says a lot of things, and literally none of it is true. They don't like they have access to control on the space station's thrusters, but the actual like maneuvering has to be a coordinated agreement from multiple ground controls. There is no like singular control. This is a common like This is a common uh man. Okay, I'm not gonna make that joke, but this is a common chest beating thing that they've been doing, especially since actually not since way before Ukraine. They constantly threatened to nuke the world like multiple times since Putin came into office back in 2000. And even back then, they threatened to they literally like threatened to nuke the world over even the most trivial of nonsense. Uh, like uh, some we stood them up at like some meeting one time back in like 2012, and they literally like made a big public official announcement like you should remember that we have nuclear weapons. Like, okay, so do we, morons. And you know, like so does like literally so does like literally everyone else you keep threatening, except the countries that you actually invade. But everyone that you like keep threatening to nuke is always someone who also has nukes. So you're not really being that smart. Like even formerly, I formerly didn't like Macron. I considered Macron kind of a coward. But Macron actually had a Giga Chad moment with when he was sitting down with Putin because he was the only one that like Putin would talk to, and Putin did the nuke thing like face to face with him, and he was and he literally said his response literally was we have nukes too, like word for word, and he reminded him of something I guess in his old age Putin like forgot because Putin was like you are you so sure America would respond if we did X, Y, and Z? And Macron was like, no, I speak for my country. We have nukes. France has nukes as well. You do realize that, right? We have enough to wipe you off the map on our own. As for those who don't know, America and Russia aren't the only countries that have nuclear weapons. France has quite a bit. Uh, Britain also has quite a few. Israel secretly has a few. Iran wants them really badly. North Korea has a few, but they're basically just 1945 atom bombs that they can't really send them anywhere. Like their missiles that they keep launching, like half the time they blow up like mid-flight when they're testing them. China has a number. China has a couple thousand. India has several hundred, and Pakistan has several hundred, both with the intent of explicitly using them on each other, because those two will like go to war over like losing a cricket match to the other, basically. But yeah, the U.S. and Russia aren't the only countries that have nukes. Like France could literally wipe out Russia on its own. France has like 260 or so, and everyone misunderstands the nuke thing. Also, like they point at the U.S. and Russia, like the U.S. and Russia have 6,000 nukes. That is not actually true. The U.S. and Russia have 6,000 nukes that exist. The U.S. and Russia being highly doubtful because they don't actually have the budget for it. Uh, the U.S. and Russia each supposedly maintain 1,600 nukes, as in actually constantly change the material out when it needs to be, because you actually have to constantly do stuff to nukes for them to work. But uh, the U.S. maintains roughly probably about 1,400. Russia claims they maintain 1,600. However, rough amalgamations of math based on like how much equipment they have and how much money they clearly spend on stuff other than their nukes versus their total amount of military budget, which in and of itself is not even half the amounts needed to maintain such a supposed nuclear arsenal. Subtracting like those from each other, they might maintain they might be able to maintain a few hundred nukes if they're really actually committed to it. However, they also really don't have they don't have a great track record with maintaining their military equipment either. Like they that's part of the worries about that we have security wise about like countries getting nuclear material, about like how North Korea potentially got stuff and how Iran might get stuff, is Russia has a really bad habit of internal corruption, of like just outright stealing stuff and hustling it on the black market. Not that you could or would do that outright with a nuclear warhead itself, but you could potentially arrange something with like some of the material for it. But like for example, that's been an issue of why you have seen so little Russian aviation, and and so so much like failing of their supposed modern like sight systems and whatnot in their vehicles, is because at like their bases, a lot of the guys will just like uh steal like computer chips, the onboard computers and stuff like out of things, and just sell it. And they'll be part of like a group, and the guy who's in charge of maintenance will just like write it off as still being there because he's in on it, because he gets a cut of it. And they like sold off like so much of the stuff that when they tried to bring up like extra stuff for the invasion, once stuff started failing by like April, they keep having these shortfalls of equipment, to the point that now obviously you've seen they've resorted to uh, World War One again, and just sending waves of hundreds of guys at a time with AKs that may or may not be loaded, to run across this open space in front of Bakhmut while they get mowed down by machine guns in the trenches on the other side, because they forgot that machine guns exist now. So yes, intelligent decision making all around. Uh, but yeah, Russia potentially probably does have a few hundred maintained, but they don't have the supposed 1,600 in actual like maintained operability that they claim. Uh, so even so, taking that on account, like I said, the U.S. and Russia don't really have 6,000 nukes. They have them in existence, but they only maintain a certain number, and within that maintained number, both of us actually only have about 400 in a launch like position, like actually able to be deployed. So like we could launch the 400, but then the other like hundreds that are still maintained, we would then have to like move them out to like a facility and put them onto missiles and stuff, and then launch them. So in reality, the whole like 6,000 nuke like thing, that's not actually real. Like they're real in that they do exist, but there are not 6,000 nukes on either side, like on missiles ready to go. There's at most usually a few hundred, because uh, the maintaining nuclear weapons like in a usable in a usable state is expensive enough. Maintaining them and their launch systems and vehicles, because many of them are in expensive submarines. Remember that part. Uh, that is even more tremendously expensive. So no one's actually paying to maintain and have at the ready 6,000 damn nukes. A few hundred, yeah, because that's about how much you would need to assuredly get through any shoot down systems, and make sure that you wipe out the enemy side. So the whole like we would launch like 12,000 nukes at each other, and it would like wipe out all life on the planet. That's not actually a thing. Uh, we would we wouldn't even like really launch all 400 from each side, assuming that they do have 400 capably ready. Like even that wouldn't really happen because you only need to launch a few specifically at some specific targets. Because I'm sorry that I've gone way off. For anyone who's new to like the streaming, my streams, I've gone way off from what the title was supposed to be about. But we covered most of that anyways already. So I'm going to finish this ramble and then I'm probably going to be done. But for the nuke thing, uh, nukes aren't like, and this is an issue raised by people who get contentious about Russia potentially splitting apart. Uh, they're like you can't let that happen. There would be like 30 different countries that would all have nukes. No, there wouldn't. There would be two countries that would have nukes instead of one country. I'll show you actually, as I have a likely Russian split map. Again, this isn't something I'm saying is like definitively accurate. This is just like this like a vague thing I can throw out there because like Dagestan, Chechnya, Tatarstan, and Bashkiri, they're leaving when it all falls apart. That's basically a guarantee. There's a very likely split that's going to happen between Russia and Siberia. Even though most of the people here are ethnically Russian now, uh, the people like in the east, which is actually where a fair deal of the Russian friends and associates I've had over the course of time have been from, they really, really despise like heartland Russia, like to the point that some of them have actually openly said like, yeah, if it was going to split and our choice was like stay here and be something different or go and like remain with Russia, we would stay here even after the split. And then you have like Buryatia and Tuva down there. uh Russia and Siberia would have nukes after Russia breaks apart, because one, the maps that you've seen online or on Reddit of like Russia in like 50 billion pieces are completely delusional. Uh, that is how things were arranged back in the 1500s. However, like 90% of those ethnic groups don't even exist anymore. Those a lot of those peoples were moved around, and a lot of areas were Russified. Peoples were wiped out. Also, some to the disbelief of some of them would actually choose to remain within Russia. The primary ones that wouldn't would be Tatarstan, Bashkiri, Dagestan, and Chechnya. Maybe Ingushetia. They've been getting a bit antsy lately, so we'd have to see. But on the nuke thing, as I got distracted from, uh, there would not be 30 bajillion countries with nukes, and no, each of these new countries would not all have nukes because nukes aren't they're not like just around everywhere in each country. Like, for example, in the U.S., on land, our nukes are in North Dakota, Montana, and Wyoming, and Missouri at our strategic bomber base where the B-2s and soon the B-21s are stationed at. And then the rest are on our submarines, obviously. Uh, Whereas in Russia, it's a similar setup. Their nukes are in Murmansk, Karelia, Yaroslavl. Uh, I think Kalmykia is where uh, Kaputskin Yar is. Kalmykia, Karelia, Murmansk, Yaroslavl, and Magadan, as well as Engels Air Base, which is in one of the oblasts just south of Moscow. So they have more locations. They have more locations than we do in the U.S. that the nukes are scattered throughout. However, it's literally like four for us versus like six for them, and none of the locations. It's not like literally each location is in a place like that would separately break away, because like despite the whole Karelia rejoining Finland thing that people constantly think of, that actually wouldn't happen because the Karelian people are like mostly gone, and Finland has repeatedly like every time people have brought that up, Finland's repeatedly said that they're not interested in it anyways, and unlike Russia, they're not really known for being liars. So no, there would not be 30 new countries that all suddenly have nukes. There would be two, because Siberia would have the nukes that are in Magadan, but I mean that would be about it. And even then, there's obviously the issue of they might hand them over to somebody, uh, probably to us because we're right over there in Alaska. Definitely, they definitely wouldn't hand them over to Russia. I would assume, hopefully not, because they would have learned that lesson from Ukraine. But the reason wasn't because like Ukraine didn't like nukes or trusted Russia so much. The reason was because nukes are expensive. So that would almost certainly be the reason why Siberia would probably like give up the nukes that are in Magadan, but they almost certainly wouldn't give them up to Russia this time. Oh wow, you guys actually stopped. That is strange after you guys were like super chat spamming for so long. All right, let me check the list real quick, just to make sure we did go over just about everything on the future oil supply upcoming list. So we got Guyana and Suriname, Senegal, Mauritania, Guinea, Namibia, India, Brazil, Argentina. Oh, wait, I forgot. I did forget something. I forgot to do. Oh, no, that's not the one. That's the one I used to learn all the states of everything. Topo, that's where we're going. Sorry, this is the largest one I could get, but there will actually be expanding production upcoming in Malaysia and Indonesia because despite peaking and being on their terminal decline for a while, Indonesia was never completely explored, actually, not even close. Almost all their production was coming from fields onshore on Sumatra in this region, and some stuff offshore here, and a bit on Borneo here, and then some stuff offshore around here. They actually still have all of this like offshore stuff that they never really touched exploration wise. And Malaysia still has a huge amount of water offshore stuff that they can go into. Granted, China has apparently recently claimed that all of this, all the way down here, even past Vietnam, is part of Chinese territorial waters. Uh, but they're not really going to do anything about it because actually, uh, despite being delusional, don't they constantly seem to not have the courage they bluff themselves up to. As Malaysia and Indonesia have like openly like challenged their ships when China will like send a ship down. Malaysia and Indonesia will like send ships out to meet it, and after repeated threats towards them, the Chinese warships will then like actually just turn around and like run away, which is kind of funny. And also, despite being a mega green country, Australia is actually not against oil and gas exploration. They have most of the stuff is going on off their northwestern coast, which is where they found a lot of gas fields. The condensate production accompanying those has added oil production. However, they have started onshore production, onshore exploration here, where there is probably some bit and a bit here. Granted, the most likely place is this big inland basin here. in which this area here, just this area here, has been explored in the past and stuff was found there. But the rest of it is kind of untouched. Also, I think this side basin here or this thin one that looks like Albania, one of those two was fully explored in the past, and those fields are on decline now. But there is likely some bit there, and potentially, obviously, some bit here as well. And in the Australian Bight offshore slope, plus some up here, probably, and then the whole area between them and Papua New Guinea, although that's obviously going to be a split region. And then to finalize things, real quick, we have the Arctic, which things will be gaining, which things are already expanding into, in terms of us doing more stuff in Alaska, and Norway constantly pushing upwards. They're doing a lot of, since they basically completely explored the North Sea already, their new developments and stuff are mostly along this mid-shelf area they have here, but they also have been pushing off into their shallow Barents Sea waters up here in the Arctic. And in terms of Russia, there is way more in the Arctic to be found. But before you ask, like, well, do you mean Russia, the Russian Federation, or potential future Russia/Siberia? And the answer is both. It doesn't matter because that doesn't change what is present in the location itself. They have this entire area up here. This area is land here, and this is where a huge chunk of their oil and gas is coming from now. And obviously, this bit extends up here into the Kara Sea. Then they also have Laptev Sea. They have this whole archipelago shelf, and this inland area here, this very, very shallow low-lying inland area. And then also they have this like L-shaped curve in here that they can go into at some point. Most of that is still really untouched in their terms. Most of their oil and gas is coming from near their Kazakhstan border. A big chunk is coming from here. Another chunk is coming from the Sea of Okhotsk, which is way down there past Kamchatka. And some other bit is coming from like central southern Russia or so. But yeah, there's a huge, huge chunk that is likely undiscovered up here, just because of one, because of the setups to begin with, which are really nice and conducive, and also because the sheer size and scale of the whole the whole region. Okay. Oh, now when it blah blah blah. All right, that is going to be it then. This time I actually am surprised that only that many people like really showed up. I expected this one would have probably been one of the ones that got more people, but whatever. The total record number of viewers I think was 18. That was during the I think that was during the What to Expect in 2023 stream, maybe. I'm not sure. Thank you, Nebraska person, for the $20. And that will be it then. So, the video of this will be all 3 hours and 14 obnoxious minutes of it will be up. Probably immediately, maybe not. It depends on how long YouTube takes with the video processing thing. But that will be it for this. So I will see you all around next time.